Hello, it's Andrew Eborn here with another edition of Lives on Lockdown. Welcome back after the break. Fantastic. We're going all the way over to LA where we're again joined by Paul Roffman. How are you doing, Paul?
So much better. I was going to change my top in the break, but I didn't.
Oh, we loved it. Well, last time, for the benefit of those who saw the last episode, you will know that Paul was about to spill the beans, to open the kimono, to stop skirting around, and suddenly, in the way that they do in LA, we got hit by a super injunction. So Paul was stopped in his track. We had to take a break. But he was basically about to tell us what we said. We agreed we probably wouldn't do any names because the three people watching wouldn't know the names anyway. But the points of principle about what people are being forced to do in these times, you've got some views on that. Tell us those.
People have a need to do something. They're under pressure, and there's that feel of desperateness, which definitely happened in the beginning of the COVID-19 experience. I mean, I can't remember the first 2 weeks, pretty much. It's kind of gone from my memory.
March the 23rd, we had our sort of lockdown in the UK, and it's sort of similar in LA. I think, when did it start in LA? We'll come on to this in a bit, but when did it start in LA?
I think we were a couple of weeks before you.
Yeah.
The lockdown.
So yeah, you were about March the 11th, I think. 11th. Around that sort of time.
That was it. I think I had that meeting on the 11th, and the 12th they were working from home.
Yeah.
And so I feel people, have a need to do something, and suddenly their business has gone, or it gives them solace, and I understand that. But, and here's the big but. You
get a lot of big butts in LA, don't you?
There's a lot of big butts, and if they didn't have big butts, they'd be maybe a bit healthier, and then maybe not so many people would be dying. Controversial, but true. Be healthy. That might help. So look after your immunity. That might help. Just saying, it will help with a lot of things. I mean, we're washing our hands, aren't we? That's stopping the spread of colds and flus and viruses and who knows what else. So, little lesson there. Anyway, I digress. So I understand those people, and I understand that need. But then there are people who are professionals, who are good at what they do, and have worked hard to continue to be good at what they do, and to get a business going. And people feel a bit desperate. And the problem is, for example, here, I've invested in a bit of kit.
Now, we like the kit. Lots of people have written in saying they admire your kit. And being a salesman that you are, you should have done the Paul Roffman guide to kits. That would work out well.
Yeah, I'd need to get a little bit of a percentage on the kit.
Only a little bit. Well, I'll get the rest of it.
To be bothered. So I have thought about doing Zoom events and all of this sort of thing, but I'm a performer who likes people, and it's about interaction, and it's about the comedy, and it's about the being in the moment, and it's about the improvisation, which I'll come on to as well as another thing. But so there are people who are performing who haven't got that background and don't have that experience, and so there's a hole there. And yes, the tricks are tricks, but people always say when they see a magician in real life in front of them, one of the things they say, I've seen it on TV, but now I'm seeing it right here in my hand, right in front of me. It's amazing. It's a different experience. And yes, it is. And a lot of these magicians are using camera tricks, and that's fine. And there's a whole market for camera tricks and YouTube moments and Instagram videos and faking it. And I don't like it. So,
but why don't you like it? I mean, I said I'd put the other side, because I think nowadays, if you go to the movie and you see millions of dollars, you're in LA, they spend millions upon millions on special effects.
Yeah.
You're there as a magician. magic on television, I've said this before, magic on television, all it is a documentary of people's reaction. Yeah, because you can't, you can work on it basically, because you can do the best magic tricks. You can chop somebody in half and slice them into zillions of pieces, turn them into butterflies, they'll come back together again. It's a fantastic magic trick, but that's what the magic of cinema does. When you're doing magic, is it not about the reaction? And why does it matter how they achieve that?
That's a good question, because even when you're doing it live, does it matter how you're achieving the effect? There are many ways to skin a cat, and doesn't matter.
Well, don't skin cats. Don't start that routine. You'll get more people writing in.
Does it matter when you're doing that anyway? No, it doesn't actually. It doesn't matter in those circumstances. But when you are performing as a magician, there is a contract of a sense of reality, a sense of this experience is happening, and I'm using my senses as the punter, as the audience, to experience this. And with all those senses working, I don't know how it's done, and I'm taken on a journey. When it's a film, you're taken on a story, it's a narrative. We suspend disbelief of the visual, and we know it's special effects. And then we buy into the reality of the narrative. And yes, you could have that. You could have a magic show that was a beautifully CGI'd magic show with a narrative, and that would work. That would work. And people are trying to reinvent the mediums, and that's fine. But it's not the same as working in front of someone and creating that live action.
But of course it's not. In the same way as when you go and see a musical, and we had the classic example last year of Cats, which is a fantastic stage show, and probably one of the most wonderful musicals of all time. People will say it's the big favourite. We then had that catastrophe of a movie where it became the laughing stock, furballs all around, you know. It was terrible because it was that sort of combination where it wasn't quite the stage show, but they had these sort of special effects where you had the todulous Tom and all these sort of weird things, and it just was wrong, wasn't it?
The worst thing to happen to cats since dogs.
I thank you. Everybody has their perfect quote, which I love. It's got to be good. But that's the point, isn't it? And if you're going to argue the other side, is that as magicians, unless there are those who are professing, well, you're a mentalist and I can really read your mind, or I can bend a spoon for real, and you're doing on that sort of stuff, it is a lie, isn't it? But does the lie matter?
There is a suspension of disbelief in the reality. You have to create a new medium. So the race is, I suppose, to create good magic for the environment. And there are effects that you can do on camera, still feeding the narrative that this is really happening and it's not CGI, that you could only do on camera. And that's fine. And, you know, there's plenty of tricks that are being done. And you know, pre-COVID, they sell tricks like that. They sell tricks by amazing visuals. They look amazing on camera, but you couldn't do them in real life. And I suppose that's the same for theater. I mean, there are some tricks you can do on stage that you couldn't do close up. There are some close-up tricks that wouldn't work on stage. And if you're doing a TV show, you have to think about the camera. You have to think about the camera. The problem that's happening now as well is you're recognizing the skill of various people. In a TV show, you have cameramen, you have sound recorders, you have editors, colorists, you have a multitude of things. And when you start removing those things, these things start getting flat. They start becoming very thin and taken away, and it gets pared down. And pared down is great. That sense of magic with a deck of cards is so wonderful because there's nothing but the deck of cards, you know, it just appears. Stage magic is great with a big David Copperfield alien arriving and dinosaurs and whatever he manages to do. But he creates the connection with the audience in that theater. And it's very, very difficult to have a real connection, a live connection with an audience virtually. It's harder. And, you know, people will succeed at it in various ways. But there are some really great magicians who can do it. And it's a difficult one because, you know, where do you start? How do you get better? The problem is everything now is forever. Everything is digitized. Everything is remembered. If I make a comment now on this podcast, if somebody says on this YouTube, whatever it is we're doing.
It's universal. We're going everywhere. It's every possible
Everywhere.
media, whether now known or hereafter invented, as we lawyers like to say. It's got to be good.
So one sentence that I say can be ripped out, taken out of context, and then I can be judged on that one sentence. And contextually, it might have meant something different. I may have got it wrong equally, because we talk, we're human beings. We sometimes say things we don't mean. I might have been being sarcastic, or there's a multitude of nuances. And so we're always trying to communicate nuance. And I suppose it's a thing about nuance. When you watch Guardians of the Galaxy, you're transported away to the most amazing sci-fi and incredible alien worlds. And you leave your disbelief behind because it's so beautifully imagined. So there's room for it, I suppose. But it's, you know, I was watching Joe Rogan on his podcast, which he was talking about comedians. He was talking to Patton Oswalt, and they were talking about live comedy and how some of these comedians are doing these Zoom comedy shows and how terrible it is. And they can't tell because there's no interaction. There's no response. Now, it may be that I'm coming from a certain position as a performer. So when I perform magic, it's akin, I suppose, to stand-up or theater. And so it is about an audience. It's not just about the trick. And I've worked hard for it not to be just about the trick. But then if it's just about the trick, like you said before, you can buy a trick, you can do a trick, you can show a trick, and everyone goes, "Oh, that's a great trick. What a wonderful trick. He made the coin disappear." But I'm watching my computer, it probably did something.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right on that. And I say we've had lots of comics where you need to be fed. You need to have that sort of interaction. And as a comic, unless you're really, really good at working with this sort of media and you sort of, this is how you engage, there is no rhythm, there is no interaction. And as a result, it's stripped bare and doesn't work, does it?
It doesn't work. It's one of the hardest rooms to perform in on stage is one with a dance floor in front of you. So you have this gap of a dance floor, and then you have tables, and then you have a circle of tables. So if I'm on stage, there's tables here and tables here and tables in front of me, and a big empty area. What that does is it saps away all the energy in the room. It's like your joke goes out and it falls flat into the empty void. But when there's people, it's almost like they mop it up and they share it. And that's what theater is. That's why this nonsense about social distancing theater seats. It's a nonsense. It's not going to happen. It's impossible. It's not going to happen. And we will find a way back to theater because it's the very essence of humanity. And I think that about maybe not shaking hands immediately, but it's so inbuilt in us. Now there's people who will never shake hands again, and that's fine, or hug, but we hug. We're tactile. We don't want to hug but I'm a hugger. You know, I had there was an events organizer I dealt with who I fell out with, and I tried to make it right. And I said, should we like have a hug now? She went, "I'm not a hugger." And I went, "All right, go on, off you go." But yeah, so it's kind of, for me, it's ingrained in the humanity of it, and that's what's so fascinating, and that takes me to improvisation, because it's this idea. I mean, here's a tip: it's this idea of scripting. Now, as a close-up performer, most magicians do not script their trick. But if you think about it, each trick has a narrative, which doesn't mean there were once 4 queens and 4 robbers. It doesn't mean that. That is not a narrative.
I'm so glad you say it doesn't mean that, because it's so tiresome. One of the biggest bugbears I've got, and as I say about magic and magicians, and they get the trick, they buy the new thing. It comes, of all things, with the script. And a lot of people regurgitate in a really appalling way that script. And I've heard that, and you've heard that many, many times. So it's good to say, when you're saying about a narrative, look at that. Here's a rough idea of what the storyline is, but come up with your own, yeah?
Absolutely. And come up with what makes, what's interesting about you. Because I'm not going to do Faye Presto's act. Now, I might learn her tricks and I might get a sense of it. And, I remember she said, steal from the best, but adapt it. And comedians say that to a degree, but comedians have more of an ethos about not making jokes, whereas magicians just steal them all the time. Magicians sit there and they watch a very good magician perform with a couple of good lines and they go, I'm going to use that line. Like they have a right to use it. Now, you can't. I did a show at the Magic Castle. So the Magic Castle, for those who don't know, is really the home of magic. It's in LA, but I would say it's probably the most impressive magic venue that I've ever seen.
Oh, without doubt, because every single sense, as soon as you arrive, you realize you're in a magical place, don't you?
Absolutely. There's various rooms. There's close-up rooms. There's a big stage. There's a smaller parlor room. There's magicians who work downstairs and just pop up, and you never know who you're going to see. And they change the roster every week. And I joined the Magic Castle originally in 2010, so I would come out to LA. On holiday, and in 2010 I had an O1 visa and I came for 6 months. And that was
for those who don't know, what is an O1 visa? What are the different types of visas?
So the O1 visa was for performers. It's actually for anyone of extraordinary ability or who's going to work on.
Isn't that nice? Wouldn't you just want to go on stage and say, "Oh, I've got extraordinary ability. I've been certified by the government"? It's a great line.
Yeah, I'm an artist of extraordinary ability.
It's got to be good. And get your award-winning magician. I love an artist of extraordinary ability. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I got that in 2008. So
I too.
It came when the crash happened.
It's the year you started your corporate gigs, as you say, 2008. You are an artist, a magician of extraordinary ability.
With
you can make all the work disappear. It's
no money, no gigs, and I couldn't afford to come out to LA with my visa going. And I was in Spain at the time because my dad moved out to Marbella in about 2000. And actually, Max Somerset came out to do a gig with me in Spain. And I remember we were up in Benavis, which is this little mountain, one road up to this village, if you like, near Marbella. And we'd just been for lunch, and I get a call from my lawyer, and she said, "Oh, you've been approved for your O1." I went, "Great, pause that for a minute because I'm not ready to come." She went, "No, the clock's ticking." And so I couldn't come, and it was literally the last 6 months of my visa. Everything sort of came in place. It was 2010 January. I had a flatmate in my home in Fulham, and he had a friend who wanted to rent my room for 6 months. So it was an opportune moment, and off I went. So I ended up in LA, and, I would say that's early days of me as a magician. And I was predominantly pushing myself as an actor, and I was doing acting classes. And I'd done in 2007, I think it was, I'd come on a recce mission to LA with a group called, I think they were called Industry Hollywood. And we met agents and casting people, and we did classes, and it was a great, great week and a good experience. And so I've come back in 2010, and I met some really great people at the time. So what was so great about that? I joined the Magic Castle. I was invited to the Magic Castle, and my friend said, "You should be a member here." And I don't want to be a member anywhere, really. Although I've always been a member of the Magic Circle pretty much when I started, and I still am. and it's a lovely club. But it doesn't have the facility of the castle, which is, it's hard to be, because the castle is a business as well. So I came along to the Magic Castle, and this fella said to me, "You should join." And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Look, that guy over there looks important. Go and ask him how you join." So I went over to this fellow who was wearing a badge, Magic Castle badge. I said, "Well, how do I join the Magic Castle?" And he said, "Show me a trick." And I said, "What now?" And he said, "Yeah." And I showed him a trick, which was my card under box routine. And he went, "Wow." And he turned to his friend and said, "Yeah, he's good." He said, "Give me your details." And somehow I was in. I never did an exam. I never did anything. I don't know how that happened. It just it was obviously meant to be.
Well, it happened because that's the way it should be, isn't it? If people say, and I won't do now because your camera angles are all wrong, but maybe a bit later we can get you to show something. But I think the principle is exactly that. Magicians always are being asked, show us a trick. So it's that spur of the moment thing. And people often say that if you ask any other profession, if you're a dentist, you don't suddenly remove a tooth, or you're a gynecologist, you don't suddenly do whatever you need to do there to demonstrate how good you are at your profession. But magicians always get that, don't they? What's your normal response when people say, "Show us a trick"?
There isn't one, actually. It depends. It depends on the situation. I am the sort of person who probably will have something on them if I'm going out socially, but I'm not out to perform. But if pushed, I will perform, because I don't want to be that guy who's just pushing magic on people. But I also don't want to be the guy who won't do magic, because that doesn't help you in any way. And people love magic. And people, the other advantage to being in LA as an actor and a magician is, as they say, it's a double threat. That is something they respond to. The Americans do respond to multiple skills. And I think it's built in the psyche of their work ethic, because people here will have 2 or 3 jobs, and it's quite normal. They work hard, Americans. I think
in the acting profession, I mean, you had to have 2 or 3 jobs. If you can't go to any LA restaurant, you can't at the moment go to any LA restaurant, but all of them are actors or got a screenplay or got whatever it is, aren't they?
Yeah. But I don't find that in the UK in the same way. Yes, there are obviously actors who have to have other jobs. But I mean, in general, people have multiple jobs, even if they're not actors. There's that kind of work ethic. I also think it goes the other way in America, in that people are seen to be working multiple hours and get nothing done. And, sometimes they're impossible to deal with. I actually think it's built in the tip culture and the taxing culture here. When you buy things, I think it's all built into that. Because here, if you go and buy a burger, you go to a restaurant and it says $10 on the menu. It's not $10. It's $10 plus tax plus tip. And tip is, 20% now, 15 to 20%.
Yeah, you normally, for those who haven't been to the States before, it is exactly that, isn't it? And you look at it. What are the rules that you follow? I was told that you look at what the tax is, because that's that little extra bit, and you double whatever the tax is. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's what I've heard. But then you sometimes think, well, I only want to give 15%. I think that's fair enough. And then you start drifting into the 20%, and sometimes it's on there, and it doesn't warrant it. And it's not a country. Certainly, LA is not the service country that it used to be, the service state that it used to be. In the 80s, America was way advanced. It was forward thinking. It was a different place. It's not that now. Europe is, in many ways, much more advanced in its sort of technological outlet. I mean, apartments here don't have washing up machines, washers and dryers as rope by rope. In the UK, that's normal. You have a washer and a dryer. Here they have communal washer and dryer rooms, even in these very expensive apartments with a pool and a hot tub, as mine does. It's a group of like 54 apartments, but they have a communal washroom, and it's not very good, and it's beggars belief, but the majority are like that. So it's a strange place in that respect. I can't remember how I got onto this now.
No, I'll tell you how you did it, and this is what I love about it, because it's really appropriate. You were talking about improvisation, and I love what I love about these journeys. It takes us everywhere. So, and we were saying, and it was my fault, because I said to you that my pet hate is when people buy a trick and it comes with a script, and the majority of people then just regurgitate, normally in a really bad way, that script. And you were saying, bring your own personality into it, work that out, work out the mechanics of it, rehearse, but make sure you perform it, but in your way. And you're coming on to improvisation and how that helps.
So they often talk, and I think I heard Darren Brown talk about it. And Darren Brown, for anyone who hasn't watched Magic, or Darren Brown gets it absolutely right, in the sense that, be it on television, theater, or even close up, you know, he is authentic. And when you meet him, he's pretty much the fella that you've seen or read. And he paints, and he writes.
Oh, he's a brilliant painter. Fantastic. His Orson Welles is just, I can picture it now in that wonderful oil type thing. He's a superb painter, isn't he?
Wonderful painter. Just incredible. And they're huge. They're
massive.
Huge, massive. You can see them on his website, I think.
No, you can, absolutely. And then look at the art section, it's fantastic.
I mean, I've got his books behind me here.
I was going to ask you about your bookcase, because I've travelled to some of the best living rooms around the world. We've been to Australia and Zambia and all the places in between. Tell us about your bookshop. Tell us about your bookshelves. What have you got on there? I know it's a bookshop as well, because you've got your own books up there somewhere.
What have we got up there? It's pretty much all my magic book collection sent over from the UK.
And a few cuddly toys.
My little Spurs dog up there.
Is that for your daddy?
He's been there. He's been around for a long time. Yeah, I mean, I've got important, but there's books like Darwin or Tease, Strong Magic, which I always found a strange one, because I think it's a wonderful book. I'll full stop there.
We love it. Oh, you've got Drawing Room Deceptions, I can tell, you see, from behind you. There you go. Look at that. That's nicely placed.
Guy Hollingworth, Drawing Room Deceptions, specifically placed there as a... And I think it's... What's that? Darren Brown, Absolute Magic, which is a specifically for magicians book. And it's a wonderful... a wonderful book. And he talks about that experience of narrative. A lot of his stuff is not just about tricks, and you're very hard pressed to find how Darren does his tricks. It's not about that. That's the funny thing. People who will look for his stuff, they're never going to find it, because they're never going to be able to recreate it. Because it's not about
all of it, as you said beforehand, it's all about the narrative with Darren's stuff in particular, and a fantastic team behind him. Some names will be familiar to the general people, like Andy Nyman, who talk about having multi-talents, who was in Fiddler on the Roof and superb, absolutely superb. And nobody knew that about him, or very few people knew that about him. A brilliant actor, a wonderful creative thought. And when you find out about the story about how the Darren Brown series came about, and I've known Andrew O'Connor for years, and Michael Vine, who at that stage were Objective and now set up their new thing. The story behind that, about how you're molding, if you like, a brand. You're creating a character, and you live that character, and the team that feeds into that, from the scripting to the narrative to the direction, that's what makes the show, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that, that brings me on to a point that is something that I find difficult with me as a performer, because I don't think of myself as Paul the magician, or Paul just the actor, or Paul the musician, or Paul the voiceover guy, whatever it is. I am all those things. So ultimately, for me, it's about being a performer. It's about finding a way of getting that need to create and to perform out. And even on my Instagram, and I've been told Paul Roffman Magic on Instagram should be just magic. And they're right. It should be just magic. But I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in my diary of life and my perspective of things. So sometimes it's magic, and sometimes it's me hiking up the Hollywood Hills. And at the moment, it's me, showing the army, the National Guard walking through Hollywood. Because
I saw that. It was a bit frightening. Now we'll come on to that in a bit.
Yeah.
What's going on there? But yeah, it's very frightening.
So I like, I am all those things, and I that's what I feel about America. It gives you much more the opportunity to appreciate the fact that you do multiple things. You're not just, are you an actor or a magician? I'm both. Really? Are you? But are you though? Are you though? And it's like, yes, I am. But that's the good thing about getting to a certain age. You reach that point of not caring.
Yeah, but also, and I know again we'll sort of touch on this. The strange thing about professions, but they always want to knock everybody else because there are competitors effectively. So if there's only one job, if the other person gets it, you don't get it. But people always say, I might as well ask you this: so people always say that a magician is effectively an actor playing the role of a magician. I presume you would support that, wouldn't you?
Yes. I mean, I definitely did. Totally enthusiastically originally, but sometimes I think it's about a version of you rather than the actor. You don't need to be an actor. You need to be a storyteller, and maybe is the semantics. Are we storytellers and not actors? Can we be? Yes, I think we can be a storyteller and not an actor. But an actor is a storyteller. I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Well, it's sort of semi-interesting, but actually, you're right. Who cares about the label?
Yeah.
But the reason I like the phrase is that, and it goes back to your point about show us a trick, is that if you're billing yourself as a magician, then that's what you are. That's what identifies you. And people, when they meet you, Jeff McBride will always talk about this. They want a magical experience because you are the magician. So when you step on stage, it's just a bigger version of yourself or whatever sort of character you're playing. When you come off the stage, they want to meet you. Where are you the same sort of person, or are you just playing that role?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, there's a show idea that I've been toying with for a long time and haven't actually got up in the air. But the idea of playing multiple characters and different magicians, and how you would do that. I had actually the late Anthony Owen, we were talking about it. We had a couple of chats about it, and he was very, very helpful and gave me some good ideas. And I think that would be an interesting way to go as well.
What sort of ideas did he give you?
They were more specific to the show and sort of the narrative of the idea and
sort of thing. I mean, Anthony was a brilliant creative force behind some of the best magic shows ever, and many fond memories of Anthony. But what sort of things? Because he was such a great creative force that we could learn from.
We were talking about audience choices, giving the audience a choice about something that happened within the show that would change the outcome, and which magician performed at the end. Which was an interesting idea, and he was quite supportive of this as an idea, especially for me, because of and he appreciated sort of what I do and what I was, and I brings us back to improvisation. I was doing my magic, and I felt that acting, I wasn't busy doing acting, and somehow it was all magic, and I wasn't getting up for anything, and I didn't have an agent or anything. And a friend of mine was going to these casting workshops in London, where you would work with a casting director, and they would send you various scripts the night before, 2 days before, 3 days before, and you'd prepare your scene, and you'd be in a class of 10, 15 people, and they would film it or not, or we just watch that person. You go up, you perform it, and they give you notes and they give you feedback as if it was a real casting session, but it wasn't. But it was about, those things are about activity breeds energy, or energy breeds activity. The more you do, the more things will happen. And that's a really good point for anyone trying to be a magician, or be anything actually. And I can come back to that, as I have some strong thoughts about that, and they've proven to be true. I can talk from experience that the things that sometimes I was scared of doing or wasn't sure that I should have done, or because I did them, amazing things happened. Amazing doors and opportunities opened. And that isn't just take everything, but that is be open to things. And sometimes push past your fears. You can pretty much not do anything wrong if you get up off the sofa. You know, you're pretty guaranteed if you get up off the sofa and go out and do something, something's going to happen, and usually better than worse. Yeah, so
Well,
I went to.
it's absolutely a good point. And I remember as a child, everybody used to say, and I'm sure they said it to everybody, is that I wish I did this at your age. It was always a phrase that used to, I wish I did this. And you sort of turn around and say, well, look, why didn't you? Why would you live your life regretting the fact that you didn't take a step? And the reality is, if you try something, all you can do is turn around and say, well, I tried it, it didn't work. If you live with regret and you didn't try it, you're going to beat yourself up forever, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was talking to Lee Warren, who's a wonderful magician and keynote speaker, and he works with businesses. And it was a really therapeutic meeting during this crisis earlier on. And he was testing out something for corporates, and he said, you know, come May 2021, when you look back at May 2020, what did you do? Are you going to be pleased that you did something? Are you going to be able to pinpoint something that you went, oh, you know, it was terrible. Life was terrible and things were awful, but I picked up the guitar at that point and I started learning the guitar, and I made a routine and I kept to it, and now I can play a song. I read 3 books. I learned how to do Photoshop, whatever, it doesn't matter. And that's not just for now, that's a lesson forever. But I think we need to be reminded of that from time to time, and especially under the pressures, you know, sometimes, and especially with this, you know, there's a point where you say, things are really bad and you don't need to beat yourself up because you haven't written your book. You know, there was that kind of need. Oh my God, we're locked down. I've got to write my book. This is the time. I've got nothing to do. I can write my magnum opus. And then you don't. And then you're like, why didn't I do that? It's okay. You don't need to write your magnum. It's okay. You know, but there also is the point where you've got to put the alcohol down and say, well, now's the time. You know, this is the reality. I'm still alive. What am I going to do? What else can I do? And so you have to start thinking about those things.
And you're absolutely right. I think it is an extraordinary time. We'll come on to this a little bit more, but I think it's a great unifying thing. Nothing unites people more than a common enemy. And I think I've actually quite enjoyed this time with the family where you're locked down. I normally go out every night and do all this and running around the world and all those sort of glorious things. Being locked down makes you realize what's actually important in your life, doesn't it?
To some degree. And it's, you know, I think there's a danger of this. We're all in it together and we're experiencing it over here. We're not all in it together. Everyone's experience is fundamentally different depending on your financial circumstances, your living circumstances, your mental health, the way you deal with life anyway. There are so many different experiences going on. But you can only live in your own reality. It's no good saying, well, you know, they've got it like this and you've got it like that, but you only exist in your own reality. And obviously you've got, you know, there's things going on, and we can get onto that, where you've got to open your eyes and you've got to take a stand and you've got to look at the situation and the downward spiral that we've been heading in. Yeah.
No, it's tricky, and there are people. As I say, for some people, we will come on to this. It's been absolutely appalling. If you've been directly affected, I know lots of people. I know people who've died. I know people who've been cannot attend funerals. I mean, from that point of view, it has been horrendous, and nobody can overlook the importance of that. And what we tend to do in the media is people get numb. Everything's just a statistic. And when it's a statistic, it doesn't make it real. We sort of hide behind statistics, as opposed to you put a face on tragedy, you put a face on fear, and that's how it suddenly becomes real. So from that point of view, it's awful. In the next bit, we're going to take a break now, but in the next bit, we'll talk a bit more about LA and what's going on there. But for now, Paul Roffman, thank you very much.
All right.